Hey, how's it going today? Thanks for checking out this video. This is a recap video from a trip that we recently took to Philmont Scout Ranch in New Mexico. And so I wanted to take just a few minutes today to kind of rediscuss a bit of the gear that I chose to bring, some things that worked well, some things that maybe I would change, and just some overall impressions from being on the trip. I did make a previous video going through each piece of gear in the kit. If you haven't yet seen that, I would maybe suggest checking that out first so you can see the full setup, and then come back and watch this one. All right, so let's talk about the gear that I chose to bring and what worked and what didn't. So I have this list of gear in my original video in the comments, but I also included it here in the description as well. So if you want to kind of scan through and see the things I chose to bring, hopefully that helps. I was not looking for an ultra light setup. I was looking for something that was reasonable with weight, but still had a bit of comfort to it. And so that was kind of the goal with the items that I brought. So first thing, the Mystery Ranch Radix 57 with the pack cover. That pack is not an ultralight pack, but it does have a really good harness to it. And I had no issues with that. I wasn't carrying a ton of weight. I probably averaged in the mid-30s, sometimes low to mid-40s if we had a lot of water that we were carrying. But I tried to keep the equipment pretty light. And that pack certainly could handle, 40 pounds all day, no problems at all. There was a lot of feedback on some of my comments on the tent. So I brought the Durston X Dome Pro one. So there's an X Dome and there's an X Mid. All right, this X Dome is the one that has the poles, and that tent was wonderful for Philmont. It is a a 2-layer tent, so it has the inner and it has the shell. The nice thing about that tent is that when you set it up, you can build it from the outside in. So if it was raining, which actually happened a few days, you keep your inner dry. You also can pretty much keep the whole thing built the whole time and just break down the poles. And that would allow setup to be a much quicker process for the future because, as you know, in Philmont, you're breaking down each day unless you have a layover and you're setting up each day. So to have a tent that is convenient, that is easy to put together, doesn't require a lot of fuss, is definitely a plus. So that tent was very comfortable. We had plenty of rain, we had some hail, and the tent stayed dry, really had no issues at all with it. One thing I will say as far as the travel component, I was a bit worried about the carbon fiber poles perhaps getting damaged because we flew. So I did choose to wrap the poles in some bubble wrap, and then I put that bubble wrap set of poles in the inner of my bag, surrounded by some soft things like clothing, and I tried to protect it that way for air travel. When you get to base camp, you're able to leave things behind that's used for travel. So the bubble wrap stayed there, along with the kind of the laundry bags each of our scouts and adults used to contain everything inside our packs when we flew out. So as far as sleep equipment, I used a Sea to Summit Spark Pro, the long version since I'm a bit taller. And that bag is pretty lightweight. It's easily stuffable. It's a piece of equipment that if you're looking as to where to spend your budget for your trip or perhaps your equipment, I feel like that bag's a bit overrated, honestly, and a bit too expensive. I got that on a pretty good sale, but I also own a Nemo Disco 15, and that's maybe a pound heavier, and frankly, I think that bag would have been fine too. So, sleeping bags, quilts, that's all certainly personal preference. Really, all the gear is to a point preference. So, I think there are better options for the price. I put that in a Sea to Summit Evac compression bag. The bag worked really well. I was able to squeeze some of the air out, and of course you want to keep your sleeping equipment dry, and it worked fine for that. I also brought a Nemo Quasar 3D long pad that runs about 2 pounds. That's a bit of a luxury item, 2 pounds for a pad, but sleeping is important to me, so I chose to, put some of my weight cost there. I would bring the pad again. The pad was comfortable. I had no issues with it, no leaks. It stayed dry. It was all good. So I was on the fence, I'm sure a lot of folks are, with bringing a chair. I brought the Helinox Chair Zero. It's about 1 pound. And on a few of our shakedown hikes, for example, with Cumberland Island, I chose not to bring a chair. And then some other shakedowns we did, I did bring a chair. And I feel like whenever I didn't have the chair, I wanted it. And the few times on my shakedown hikes that I brought the chair, I could have done without it because I also had a sit pad. I will tell you that having spent 2 weeks in the backcountry at Philmont, that 1 pound for that chair was absolutely a good choice. Of course, Each person has preferences on what they, what's important to them with weight. I don't have the best back in the world for me to be able to use my chair to take a break, to read a book. It was definitely worth that pound, and that's a really comfortable chair for a 1 pound weight. So definitely a keeper for that. I also brought a Thermarest Small Sit Pad, and that was very useful for times I didn't pull my chair out if we're just taking a quick break on the trail. But that's also useful for like kneeling on the ground, keeping your knees both dry and a little bit of comfort as you're setting up your tent, getting in and out of your tent. It doesn't weigh much, it doesn't take up much space. All right, so as far as clothing, I tried my best to follow the guidebook that Philmont provides, and the clothing that I brought I felt was perfectly fine. I don't think I would have made any changes to that. So just as a recap, 2 short sleeve wicking shirts, 1 long sleeve wicking shirt, good for both sun and also, as a layer if it gets cooler, which it certainly does in the evenings there. I also had a wool mid-weight base layer from REI, which worked really well. It is important to bring separate sleeping clothes that you would use off trail, just inside of your bag. So I just had a separate, wicking shirt for that and a pair of shorts that worked great. And I chose to bring a separate base layer for sleeping as opposed to just what I was wearing on the trail. You can probably do without that. Again, it's a matter of, are you okay putting clothing on that you have the trail in your bag? For smell, for oil, for keeping your bag clean. I probably could have dealt without bringing a second base layer, but I chose to for sleeping. It just made me more comfortable since I wasn't all sweaty. So that's really, I'd say, a maybe if you're going back and evaluating things again. Do you need 2 sets of base layers, or is 1 fine? That's an area that you could probably cut some weight. I had 3 pairs of Darn Tough hiking socks, 3 pairs of Wicking underwear, the REI puffy coat that I wore each morning when it was a little bit chillier, a beanie hat, which was also worn pretty much every morning when it got cold, especially in elevation. We weren't doing Baldy, we were doing the Tooth of Time trek. And it wasn't overly cold. We didn't experience any real low temperatures in July, but it certainly was cold enough to need, a coat and a hat. So I would definitely keep those in your kit. I also had a Outdoor Research wide brim hat to keep the sun off me, which it's cool. You can get things branded there. So I had the hat branded with the Philmont logo, just a little fun souvenir. And then some old sneakers that I brought for camp shoes and for water crossing. So we ran into several water crossings. That is a real thing depending on your trek. And I would definitely suggest a actual pair of sneakers, not just sandals. The sneakers, the idea is they're good for camp, but they're also good for water crossings. They can get wet and you can then pull them off, put your boots back on, and those can dry overnight. So we brought some foot powder as well to kind of help things dry, keep the feet dry, which I thought was nice as a luxury item. But definitely, if you're thinking about footwear, of course, your hiking shoes, your hiking boots are important, but also I would suggest a second pair of shoes, not a pair of sandals for camp. All right, of course, anyone who backpacks or camps knows that rain gear is important. So I definitely used the Outdoor Research raincoat and then some Mountain Hardwear rain pants quite a bit. I actually used the rain pants when it wasn't raining. Because those slip on and slip off easily over some shorts, I was using those kind of like as a morning layer to keep my legs a bit warmer until we got going. And then as you know, when you start hiking, it get hot pretty quick. So you can then just take a quick break when we pause for water, for hydration, and pulled the rain pants off and stuck them in my stuff sack in my front of my pack, and then on we went. If you're wondering for battery, I kept my phone in battery saver mode, GPS turned off, and I think I might have gotten 3 days or so, and that was using the phone for a lot of video and a lot of photo, in addition to my mirrorless camera that I brought. So if you're trying to budget for battery, of course it's all about your usage, but with battery savings turned on, I was able to get 3 or so days before I had to recharge, and the battery bank that I brought charged my phone, I think 3 times while we were out there, and it worked fine. All right, so if you haven't yet seen the previous video I made, you might want to check that out because I covered my hydration system, which is this 1 bottle hydration hose with a little adapter for smart water bottles. And that was awesome. So what I would do is I would have the smart waters full, and then in my side pockets, I'd run the hose from the smart water bottle, as a clip to my sternum strap, and I could drink water whenever I wanted to. And that way you also were able to switch bottles real easily versus having a bladder in the back of your pack. And it's easy to refill them. So I did also have a separate smart water bottle that I used as my smellable. That's where I had my electrolyte drink. And for that, I just kept that as a regular bottle. I didn't commingle that with my water just for, keeping things smellable separate from regular. So that was kind of the plan there for hydration. All right, so I brought a nylon day pack, which I was kind of thinking would be useful for doing day treks. I didn't use that. It was handy for the air travel, but I think that in hindsight, I would have left that lightweight nylon bag in the lockers at base camp because I didn't need that for the trail. I brought repair tape. We actually did use the repair tape once. One of the tents was leaking. It wasn't the one I brought, but it was another crewmate's tent that was leaking, so we just put some tape on it, and that sufficed for the rest of the trip. A bandana, so that was useful for the sun. I actually wound up not bringing the bandana that I brought from home, and if you check out the Philmont store on camp, they have some really nice branded neck gaiters that are a little bit longer. And so I wore that each day to kind of keep the sun off my neck, along with my wide brim hat, and that plus a little bit of sunscreen was fine for the trip. Now the last thing I'll say is I brought some Black Diamond aluminum trekking poles, nothing overly fancy, but just some normal poles with the rubber tips on them. And I 100% would recommend bringing poles. I do a lot of hiking, day hiking, that I don't use the poles, and I'm fine, but having poles with you, especially as an adult on the trip, provides more stability. It provides a way to ease any water crossings that you do. It certainly makes going uphill, easier. There was, towards the end of our trip, we did a rim hike on the Tooth of Time, which was a pretty legit hike, and using those poles added a lot of stability because it was pretty easy to lose your footing into get your foot stuck in a crevice. So if you're on the fence with bringing trekking poles, and especially if you're an adult advisor versus a scout thinking about it, definitely would add that to your list. That was very useful. To wrap things up, I'd suggest if you're on the fence between bringing a piece of comfort gear that you think would improve the quality of your trip versus not, and within reason, as long as it doesn't weigh that much, consider that as a part of your gear. When it comes to the amount of food, the amount of water, and all the weight involved in those things. And then if you're thinking about a fork that weighs 3 ounces, or a cup that weighs 5 ounces, whatever it is, that's not going to make or break your trip. But if that adds a lot of joy and comfort and just happiness to the trip, again within reason, I think it's worth considering. So there are folks that do ultralight, there are folks that do pretty heavy, and there's folks in between. So where you fit, what your goals are, but I wouldn't overthink one piece of gear that is maybe going to add some weight, but it's going to bring you joy. Like, for example, I brought a Kindle. The Kindle was certainly not necessary, but I enjoyed reading each night, so that was worth it for me. So just to wrap things up, if you're packing for Philmont, if you're considering it, you're doing your planning, those shakedown hikes are really important. Having your scouts carry plenty of weight, have water management, have good skills as far as team leadership. Those are all real important things, more so than the gear that you're going to bring on the trip. When it comes to the gear, there's a balance between what is comfortable and things that are unnecessary, and I'm sure you'll find that balance. For me, I led a bit more towards the comfort level on things, but still didn't go crazy with weight. And with the exception of a couple things that I would suggest dropping that we've talked about in the video, most of the gear that I chose to bring was used and I felt did a good job. So hopefully that helps you with your planning for your equipment, for your trip. As you hopefully saw through some of the footage in this video, Philmont Scout Ranch is a beautiful place, a very special place, and yeah, it's going to be a great trip if you haven't been there yet. So thanks for checking this video out, and if you have any questions, just let me know in the comments, and have a great day.